Hello, this is Michael Ewer, and I'd like to invite you to the Michael Ewer Show, featuring student hosts and very special guests talking about a variety of interesting topics. You can find us on the Eagle Stream YouTube channel. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Michael Ewer Show. We are here with some very special guests today. First of all, we have Dr. James Wils, who is the professor of history and at Wake Tech, and he's also the advisor for one of the history clubs, and we really welcome you. And then we're going with the people who've never been here, and so Valentin Hernandez Martinez. He's one of my students. He's an engineering student, and he's also a member of the history club, and I will say he is an honor student extraordinaire. And we have Jenny Aguilera, and she is a student. She's the president of the Student Senate, and she's also representing the DEI Council of Wake Tech. So thank you so much. And then we have our host, our co-host, Damien Johnson, who is a second semester. Last show I said this was his first semester, but it's his second semester. He's also an honor student and associate in engineering student. And then we have Todd Hewitt, who is getting ready to graduate, associate in science. And he wants to transfer to NC State and major in agricultural engineering. And now we're going to go with a short video. I think we are.
The Care Center is here to provide wraparound services for our students for when out-of-the-classroom challenges arise. I'm Mike Coleman, Dean of Student Engagement and Impact here at Wake Tech.
My name is Magdalene Christ, and I'm a student at Wake Tech in the Associate of Science program. The Care Center at Wake Tech has been a great hub for resources
such as food, success coaching, technology support, brief mental health counseling, emergency financial assistance, and transportation assistance.
I've gotten a lot of great help with questions and just navigating Wake Tech. If I'm ever having a tough day or a tough time in class, the student success coaches are always there to help me whenever I need it.
Students can connect with us by visiting one of our locations, online at our website, or by email.
So to my fellow students, if you ever need help with anything, the Care Center is your one-stop shop, and I highly recommend.
And most importantly, we are here to support our students and make sure that they soar.
Well, once again, welcome to our very special guest here, and also welcome to our viewers at home. First and foremost, I want to say a big thank you to DEI for supporting this show right throughout this semester. And alongside my co-host, Damien, we're just going to go right into things. And
we can go ahead and start with, introductions, right? Like Taj already said, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming here. Thank you, Dr. Wils, for being here. Jenny as well. Thank you, DEI, for supporting this throughout the, of course, spring semester. Starting off with people who haven't been here, I guess, I would usually start off with either me or Taj as co-host, but I want to start off with Dr. Wils. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Wils, Dr. James Wils. I am a history instructor here in the humanities department at Wake Tech. I'm also an advisor to the History Club, which we revived last year. We are in our second semester of trying to foster greater historical engagement, both for Wake Tech and the larger community. So happy to be here with you all.
Of course. Thank you so much. And Jenny, if you would like to go.
Hi, I'm Jenny. Like Michael said earlier, I am the chairperson for Northern and I am the student representative for DEI.
Thank you so much. Valentin, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is Valentin Hernandez Martinez. I'm an engineering student at Wake Tech, and I'm currently in my second semester, and I'm also the vice president of the History Club.
Thank you so much. My name is Damien Johnson. I am a second semester Wake Tech engineering student here. I am co-host of the Michael Ewer Show along with Todd Hewitt. I am a STAR intern and a C3 scholar. There's not too much else to really say about me, but Taj, you can go ahead.
Yeah, and as for me, I am fourth semester at Wake Tech, and it's also my last semester getting ready to graduate. I'm actually hoping to major in agricultural engineering. I'm a Scott Scholars, student, and let's just end it right there. And so hopefully we should have some slides coming up right now that we're going to read for you guys. If Jerry could just put those up whenever he's ready. And here they are. So just a little bit of history about who Mr. Morrill is. So Justin Smith Morrill, a young senator from Vermont, had a vision for all Americans to have access to higher education, which in the early 1800s had been reserved for elite, wealthy white males. Morrill developed a proposal in 1857 to grant land for each state for the establishment of public universities. Morrill was determined in his vision and spent years to achieve support and this well-intentioned proposal. Damien?
Of course, and I'll go ahead and continue. He introduced the land grant concept in 1857 and received the congressional approval in 1859. This victory faded when President James Buchanan vetoed the Morrill's legislative proposal. Morrill regrouped and resubmitted his proposal during the Civil War. His studies and skills were critical to soldiers' sustained livelihood, and in 1862, the Morrill Act was accepted and signed by President Abraham Lincoln. And yes, that's the same Lincoln who signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So, thank you.
And just so you guys know, all of this information is going to be put in the chat if you'd like to see for yourselves. And not to spoil everything about Mr. Morrill, we're going to save a bit for Mr. Wils to answer because he's a specialist. And I say we can go right into some questions for him. So
I would say, and if you guys have any questions while we talk throughout the show, make sure you please drop them in the chat so that Mr. Wils can end up answering them.
Oh, excellent point, Damien. So, Dr. Wils, could you educate us a little bit about Senator Morrill and the first Morrill Act and how it was introduced and how it was approved by Congress?
Sure, happy to. So, first of all, it's interesting to note about Justin Smith Morrill that he was a young man from Vermont in New England. He was a really smart young man and he took schooling pretty seriously, but he came from a family that didn't have the ways and means to send him on to formal education beyond. And so at 15 years old, he actually ended his formal education so that he could take on work as a storekeeper. But he did manage to make it into Congress. He actually served a record-breaking 44 years in Congress, first in the House of Representatives and then in the Senate. During his 12 years in the House, he was a very talented behind-the-scenes negotiator, and he became something of an expert on the financial affairs of the nation. He actually was one of those who shaped legislation that would go on to create the first federal income tax. But of course, his most important and maybe unappreciated activity in the House was in 1862 with the passage of the Land Grant College Act, also called the Morrill Act, which for him was a cause that was very personal, given his own lack of educational opportunities. The act was preceded by about 20 years by a political movement in the Midwestern states that were calling for the creation of agricultural colleges that would provide American citizens with practical professional work qualifications in addition to a liberal education. As we were reading just a moment ago, most college opportunities in the United States at that time were reserved for elite, white people who were going on to study classics and, dead languages and things like that. These were not practical venues for folks who wanted to get jobs with machines or with agriculture and things like that. Several new state constitutions in the 1840s and the 1850s included calls for those kinds of colleges, most notably the Michigan Constitution of 1850. Which actually called for what became in 1855 the Agricultural College of the State of Michigan, also known now as Michigan State University, which was the nation's first agricultural college and would go on to serve as a model for the Morrill Act. Now,
Wow.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying wow, that's a lot. That's really interesting though. Thank you.
Yes.
I guess kind of continuing on, if you kind of take into note the context of the time is 1862, like you said, it's kind of the first thing that's happening. I imagine there was a lot of opposition to it, correct? So Could you tell us why a military and training function kind of needed to be added for it to pass in 1862, if you know anything?
Sure. There were a lot of states, matter of fact, mostly southern states, that opposed to this idea, believing in some cases that that the federal government could not force the states to choose education with what they wanted to do with these funds. But there were some states even who were sort of favoring the bill that wanted to see military science, military tactics taught so that citizens could also choose, professions in the military as officers. So these amendment was added in the 1861 version of the bill after it had already been vetoed by President Buchanan in 1859. The amendment was added in the 1861 draft of the bill to include teaching of military tactics, military science, which allowed it to gain a lot more support in the House among those that are already sort of, kind of on board with it. And luckily, because most of the states that were opposed to this idea ended up seceding from the Union, it lowered the threshold that was required for this bill to pass in Congress, thereby putting it on President Lincoln's desk, which he signed on July 2nd of 1862. Interestingly enough, you mentioned, of course, that he's the same Lincoln that signed the Emancipation Proclamation. It was 20 days after he signed the Morrill Act into law on July 22nd of 1862 that he read to his cabinet the very first draft of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Wow, thank you so much. I think Todd is going to go ahead with the next question that we have for you, but that was really insightful.
Yeah, and it's just incredible that, even back then, someone was able to make such a huge and significant difference that still impacts the educational system today. And so, speaking about that, I just want to say or ask you, could you tell us about some colleges or universities that were founded by this legislation? And how did states kind of help and assist in creating these universities?
So the first ones out the gate, beginning in 1862, were Iowa State University and Kansas State University. They're in the Midwest, where, again, this political movement had sort of taken root initially, and where this was really important for people who wanted to take on agricultural mechanical jobs in that region. Of course, by 1865, you also have Cornell University in New York. And by 1887, you have North Carolina State University, which is near and dear to my own heart, where I received my PhD from. So I'm a product of a land-grant university as well. The state's participation was key. They had to agree, first of all, to the terms of this bill. And it was very important that this bill was not, no state that was in open rebellion or insurrection, which meant the Confederacy at the time, was eligible for any of this. It had to be a state that was within the Union, that was loyal to the Union. And each state received, each eligible state, I should say, received 30,000 acres per member of Congress. So for some larger states, this was really quite a lot of land. Now, the land was not always in the state. In cases where the state had the land, that's where the land came from. In a lot of cases, the states were able to designate land in Western states or Western territories that would be sold off, and those funds would come back and go into funding the university or the college. But 30,000 acres per member of Congress, either within the state or contiguous to its boundaries, and either the land or the revenue would be used in establishing the institution. In order to have these institutions established, the states had to agree that these institutions would include programs in agriculture, mechanics, and military science to maintain their land-grant status. That's in addition to any liberal arts studies and things like that they would be doing.
I actually kind of answered our next question, which was going to be kind of what did these schools end up focusing on and using that for? And you said agriculture, and I'm sorry, I missed the next one.
Agriculture and mechanic arts.
Mechanic arts. Can you expand on that? Like, what do those consist of?
Yeah, so engineering is, of course, the big sort of triumph here, this transformed engineering in the United States. Most engineers before this had been trained either at military academies or at private colleges in some places. This expanded the number of people who could take advantage of access to these engineering programs that were affordable as well. This was part of the deal here, was these were supposed to be affordable means of education for people who were not that elite subset of rich white people in the East Coast.
Yeah, and Dr. Wils, in 1862, coming off the back of the Industrial Revolution, did these schools do anything else apart from just agriculture and mechanic arts, or was that just the only thing that they specialized in?
It wasn't the only thing that they specialized in. Again, this was in addition to liberal arts. Now, there were some schools, especially smaller schools, that would make agriculture and mechanics their absolute main focus, and the other programs would be very small. In some other cases, such as at Cornell and others, there were more expansive programs. The deal here, though, again, was that the programs that must be included were the agricultural, the mechanical, and the military science programs. Any other programs were sort of at the discretion of the college administration, to some extent the state legislature as well, but they had to focus at least part of their resources on agriculture, mechanics, and military tactics.
Wow. Yeah, excellent. And
it looks like we actually... No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll let you finish. I'll go ahead afterwards. But there's a question in the comments that I want to talk about.
Yeah, well, I was just saying we can get to this question straight ahead, but you summarized the first Morrill Act, very, very well, and you're almost ready to get in the second one. But would you say that the institutions that were founded off of this act are very fruitful still today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As I said, I graduated with my PhD from North Carolina State, which was eligible for the terms of this land grant status among other state universities. Lots and lots of state universities benefited from this act, as well as, and I see the comment in the chat here, HBCUs when we get to the second Morrill Act. So this sort of lays the groundwork for some expansive educational opportunities that will be coming down the pipeline by the end of the 19th century.
Yeah, it's great, and I mean, it's just, like I said, incredible that someone back in those times was able to make such an impactful difference like this.
Absolutely.
Well,
it's one of those, again, underappreciated, under-recognized for the impact that it has had on people, citizens of this nation, in terms of education. Very, very important legislation that was done there amidst the Civil War, right? That's sort of another big deal here. That the Civil War was going on, and the administration had a lot on its plate, but they managed to get this across very importantly.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's definitely the result and important factor at the end of all this. Now we have some the actual bill from, we have Valentin, reading the bill, establishing the A&M College for the colored race, and it should be coming up. Yep, here it is in just a second. And Valentin, you can go.
I read it now. Okay, so it's 1891, chapter 540, chapter 549. An act to establish an agricultural and mechanical college for the colored race. The General Assembly of North Carolina do enact, Section 1, that a College of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts be and the same is hereby established for the colored race to be located at some eligible site within the state, to be hereafter selected by the Board of Trustees hereinafter provided for. Section 2. The said institution shall be denominated the Agricultural and Mechanical College for the colored race. Section 3. That the leading object of the institution shall be to teach practical agriculture and the mechanic arts and such branches of learning as relate thereto, not excluding academical and classical instruction. Sorry.
All right. I think we're getting ready to do a quick historical piece from A&T, a person, actually.
All right, Jerry, whenever you're ready, you could put that up.
while we wait here, Dr. Wils, there was another question in chat. If you can answer it, just a quick second. They wanted to know that if DEI was even a discussion during the Morrill Act, maybe directly and or so indirectly.
In my research, I didn't come across any direct discussion of that with the first Morrill Act. This again was before even the Emancipation Proclamation. The nature of the war hadn't fully changed. It certainly did again lay the groundwork, though, for some of this discussion to come back up in 1890, and that's where we'll see the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, not fully formed ideas, and it's sort of a complicated legacy, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But there is some indirect groundwork being laid for DEI in the passage of these Morrill Acts, I would say.
And that was a very great question from our comments. Make sure you guys, if you have any more comments, keep on dropping them in the chat. We love getting them, and you guys are asking some really interesting things.
Yep. And
I guess we can keep asking questions until Jerry can get that video like he needs to. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, well, excellent. I mean, we have the time and we have the patience of everyone. And so straight away, we can just get into the second Morrill Act. And I know that the second Morrill Act had a huge impact on the South. So Dr. Wils, could you actually just explain a little bit about that?
So the second Morrill Act, again, named for Justin Smith Morrill, who was still in the Senate at that time. As a matter of fact, he would be in the Senate for 8 more years after that until he died. This was passed in 1890, and it targeted specifically the former Confederate states. This is the era just post-Reconstruction. Those Southern governments have come back into the Union, but in many ways, they're acting just like pre-Civil War Southern governments. As a matter of fact, they're known as Redeemer governments because they redeemed the Old South. So it's targeted specifically these states, and it offers to grant them actually cash instead of land in this case, although they are still still granted the land grant status, same legal standing. They are required, in order to get this cash, to demonstrate that race was no longer a criterion for any admissions in any land grant school in the South. Or they could choose the other option of establishing a separate land grant university or institution for African Americans, which of course is the bill that Valentin was just reading, gets at that in 1891. It is created for the, quote, colored race for African Americans because most of the Southern states, being, again, acting sort of like they were before the Civil War, these Redeemer governments, they were not going to allow African Americans to attend the same schools as white Americans. So again, this is a sort of complicated legacy here. It serves to uphold segregation in the South, especially in terms of education, but it also provides these opportunities for the first time to underserved citizens of color who might otherwise not have had them, right? So what ends up happening is 19 out of the 105, I think, 107 historically Black colleges and universities in the United States, 19 of them evolved from the 1890 land grant program, including North Carolina A&T State, which was founded in 1891.
Wow, excellent.
Awesome.
Well,
thank you so much. And yeah, I think Jerry has the video up, right?
He does.
Jerry, if you can go and pull that up for us. And Dr. Wils, I actually have my own question for you, but I will hold it until after.
Sure.
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
Dr. Smallwood.
So North Carolina A&T, again, was founded by the second Morrill Act, which was in 1890. And the purpose was to, of course, create land grant colleges in the South. And so A&T was one of the schools that was created here in North Carolina. Again, originally, it was part of Shaw University in Raleigh. We know that Shaw is a private school, and we're only talking about the state institutions today. And then, of course, it was moved. There was intense interest in a number of places, including Durham, to attract North Carolina A&T. And but the community here in Greensboro really pooled their resources together. And the community used to be called Warnersville. It was one of the urban renewal communities that were destroyed. But the people of Warnersville basically pooled their resources together to purchase the land to bring the university here to Greensboro. And so it's, again, a university that focuses on agricultural and at the time mechanical, the mechanical arts, and of course now, but was founded with all of the disciplines, including history and English, but liberal arts as well as agricultural and mechanical. So again, today we are the largest HBCU in the nation. We have well over or slightly over 12,000 students. We have graduate programs, MA programs, and PhD programs. And so, yeah, that's the general gist of our school. And again, it was one of a number of HBCUs that are land grant schools that were established after that act in 1890. And our school was established in 1891.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say that was from a show we did on the 5 public HBCUs in North Carolina. And Jerry is putting it in the chat. Now you can get your question. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead, Damien.
Well, it wasn't an interruption. We were scheduled. It's okay. Now, Dr. Wils, I wanted to know, if none of these bills had even gotten by or accepted or passed, how do you think that would have impacted colleges, universities today, and people of color as a whole?
That's an interesting question, and not an easy one to answer. Speculation is not necessarily one of the tools of the historian, but I believe confidently say that if those opportunities didn't happen when they did, with the Republican trifecta for the first time in Washington in 1862, right? These things might not have happened at all. They might have happened much later. I think we would have seen higher education remain the purview of the very privileged, as opposed to the multitudes of, quote unquote, common people in the United States. I don't really like that term, common people, but I guess in order to differentiate from the elites. As far as African Americans and other people of color, don't know that we can confidently assume that education would have been open to them until well into the 20th century, maybe, if at all.
See, and that's exactly why I asked, because that is astonishing.
Yeah. And
thank you so much.
Follow-up question for me. Thank you, Damien. Follow-up question for me, Dr. Wils. I just wanted to know, how important do you think it was that these schools were based on agriculture and mechanic arts rather than some other, field of study?
Well, I mean, whose father hasn't said, what are you going to do with a degree in underwater basket weaving, right? There are an awful lot of college programs out there that were just liberal arts, classical education. And listen, there's value in that stuff, absolutely. But it doesn't translate into professional jobs. It doesn't translate into quality jobs that will actually help people to achieve some kind of financial stability, some kind of financial equality. And so what you had was a 2-tier system where, again, elite whites were getting divinity jobs and law jobs and things like that, political jobs, or at least the gateways into those political jobs, while, again, quote unquote, common people, and especially people of color, these kinds of jobs were never open to them. They didn't have these opportunities because they didn't have the educational opportunities. So, I mean, these acts, they really transformed educational and professional opportunities, especially for African Americans. And again, in spite of the confines of Jim Crow segregation, right? This is all during that time period when other rights are being denied all the time. And yet education opens a pathway that allows them to really become citizens in a very real and meaningful way.
And I do want to interject that these were not the first colleges for African Americans. Shaw University was founded in 1865, and North Carolina A&T was 1891. So there were plenty of educational opportunities, but not this type of educational opportunity.
Yeah, I also wanted to just chip in a little bit about the agriculture and the mechanical arts and stuff. And I believe that, whether someone cares about it or not, we all need food, which is why agriculture is always going to be important, regardless of what job you have or your social status. And it goes for, mechanic arts, engineering, any type of problem solving industry you can think of. I mean, it's going to be important forever because, if your car breaks down, it needs to be fixed for you to go about your day. And it's not something you can say, oh, well, I'll do it next week or, you know. So that's why I feel like it was very important for these schools to really introduce these to a large diaspora of students.
Yeah. And on the topic of HBCUs and also Black history and the Morrill Act itself, I don't want you guys to forget about the AACC statewide kickoff event that's going on this Saturday. Make sure you try out, or not try out, but show up at the NC Museum of History this weekend. There's also an event next weekend, I presume, as well, but we might have some more time on that. It's about 6:30, so we want to go ahead and start doing some of our closing statements. Dr. Wils, we can go ahead and start with you. If you guys have any more questions, make sure you keep on dropping them in the chat, and we'll go ahead and close up. So, Dr. Wils, is there anything you would like to say to all of our viewers and also about perhaps the Morrill Act itself before we all head out tonight?
I would just say, again, that the Morrill Acts have transformed educational opportunities for an awful lot of people through an awful lot of decades now, going over 120, 130 years. Sorry, not terribly good at math. I think that there is still a lot of access that is not being had, and there's still work to do. But without that groundwork in 1862 and then again in 1890, we might not have the access that we have today. So they're great institutions. Some of the best colleges in the nation, of course, fall under this category. And I would also echo Damien in saying, don't forget about the African American Cultural Celebration at the NC Museum. I'll be there. I hope to see all of you there as well.
Yep. You can go around there and enjoy some music and some, refreshments. You look around the museum, and it's going to be a great event.
And Wake Tech is a sponsor, I might add. So we have Jenny. She can talk a little bit about some of the things that we're going to be doing at the booth.
Yeah, we're going to have some tables there. I know that the food bank is going to make an appearance to kind of help talk more about their DEI and what they're trying to do to reach out to the community. We will be giving out some prizes and some resources from the DEI Council. So I'm super excited for that. And we'll also have posters to remind everyone about the other activities that Wake Tech will be doing for Black History Month, such as artist talks, storytelling through hip hop. We have a whole bunch of events coming up all throughout February. So we'll also be promoting those this weekend.
Thank you so much, Jenny. We have a lot of actual questions, and I think there might be an echo going on. It's fine if it doesn't go away, but we do have a lot of questions here. This one's by Jason Riddle. He says, were there any well-known, impactful graduates from this program?
It's a great question, and absolutely, I'm sure. I don't have a list in front of me, unfortunately, right now, so I couldn't name specifically anybody at the moment, but absolutely there have been some well-known impactful graduates from these schools. Again, some of the most well-known and successful and good universities and colleges in the country fall into this category, including here in North Carolina.
And I will say, on behalf of North Carolina A&T, they did graduate Ron McNair, who was an astronaut, and Henry Fry, who was the first Black legislature in North Carolina since Reconstruction, and the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, among others, and Michael Regan, who was in the the Biden White House. But they have lots of people, all of them. And NC State certainly has many. Those were just some I know from A&T.
Absolutely.
Well,
I think that,
Damien, what do you
yeah,
think? It seems like we're
that about
coming to an end.
Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. I don't really have a closing statement. Like I've already said, make sure you guys go to the museum. I'm going to be there as a volunteer. Michael, you will be there. Taj will be there. We're also going to be performing some interviews. If you guys want to sit back, you might see us actually, going around and doing these interviews at A&T and Elizabeth City State University booths. So just make sure you pop out and be there. That's my final statement to you guys. Taj, anything else you want to say?
I have to keep chiming because A&T and Elizabeth City State will be actually sending teams of students to video this event. And so they will be interviewing people and we'll be helping. And the Michael Your Show will be live streaming the opening ceremonies from 10:30 till 11. So I don't know if Jerry can put that in the chat, but it would be nice.
Yeah, just like everyone said, look out for that event on Saturday. Come and support, and there'll be more than enough events next month coming, and I'm sure everyone's gonna have a blast.
And I do say Valentin is not saying very much, but he's going to be reading that information for me as I'll be doing a presentation on the twin colleges of North Carolina, which is in our mind, North Carolina A&T and Elizabeth City State. They are the only two HBCUs that were founded in the legislature, and they were done the same week. So they were known as twin colleges when they were founded.
Wow. Interesting fun fact for you guys.
Yeah.
Other than that,
but I said all that because Valentin didn't say anything. I didn't want him not to have a closing statement.
I get that. I didn't know we were going to do closing statements for about all of us because, Mr. Wils, he kind of covered most of the really important stuff that we talked about today. His closing statement was the only one that really had anything to it. Mine's just going to be like, bye guys, or anything like that. But I'm really glad everybody could show up. I think this was a great show today as well. There's no more questions in the chat.
Yeah, but thank you all to our viewers at home. Thank you, our special guests that were here on the show today. Come back again if you get the opportunity. It was lovely having you, and it's always a pleasure to host the Michael Your Show.